Namaste and welcome everyone to our webinar, Hinduism and Feminism. Our guest, our speaker, our faculty is Dr. Sushumna Kanan from San Diego. If you haven't yet, please put in the chat where you are zooming in from, and I'll give a little background on the webinar, introduce our guest, and we'll get started shortly. We got Renuji from Pleasanton, California. Glad to have you on. Poonamji from New Jersey. Prabhuji from Minnesota, Sugarland, Texas, Vijay Kanye, glad to have you on, Vijay G. Prabhuji, again, glad to have you on. Ravi Shankar Ji is saying this is a timely intervention to address the crisis of our time. And there are a lot of crises going on in Hindu University of America's a Hindu platform so that we can share our Hindu knowledge, wisdom, ancient traditions, with a fresh perspective that is so necessary, as you point out, Ravi Shankar Ji. So today's webinar is Hinduism and Feminism. And in this webinar, we're going to get into the complicated relationship that Hinduism and feminism has had, continues to have, and we're going to shed some light on it. There's been positive turns. We've witnessed a large surge in goddess studies. But there's also negative turns, right? Disavowal of Dharma shastras and Sri Dharma, and glorification of Bhakti and Tantra. These are all the complicated nature of being Hindu in America, around the world. There's so many different parts of the conversation. And in this webinar, we're also going to map how Hindu practitioners, some, probably not the folks that are joining us for this webinar, sometimes dismiss feminism as a Western construct, right? Without discussing the intellectual compatibility or incompatibility. And then we're going to look at post-colonial, decolonial discourse and the framework on Hinduism, religious studies in the West, and we're going to take a general look at the state of the field. So with that introduction to the webinar, let's introduce our guest, Dr. Sushumna Kanan. I have a quick bio. She's very accomplished. I'm not going to read all of it, but she's actually received her PhD in cultural studies from the Center for the Study of Culture and Society in Bengaluru, India. Her research on South Asian devotional traditions and feminist epistemology is focused on the medieval saint Akka Mahadevi and her vachanas. So she's received awards, been a French Research Fellowship in 2006 and 2007, and the Sir Ratan Tata Fellowship for PhD coursework in writing in 2003, 2007. She's published research on Bhakti, Dharma Shastras, ethics, women's writing in Kannada and in English, multilingual, and translated several things. She's at San Diego State University, I think, for about 5 years now, maybe 6. And she's received the Indic Academy Fellowship in Indic Feminism to study women's subjectivity in the Dharma texts. And so we're glad to have her with Hindu University of America. She's going to be teaching a course, and in this webinar, she's going to be giving a presentation. So with that, let me hand it over to Dr. Kanan, who will get started. And glad to have everyone joining us today. It is always my pleasure to host these. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Ankurji. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to be talking about Hinduism and feminism, which is kind of controversial and complicated. I have a slideshow here that I'd like to share. Just give me a minute.
We've got Rahul Ji from Karnataka and Dr. Pradeep Ji from Salt Lake City. Glad to have you join us. Yes, Kumuji points out India has had 2 female Hindu presidents and a prime minister, of course. We've got over 60 people joining us. Thank you for joining. And now we can see your screen. Perfect. You want to go into full screen mode and we'll get started.
Okay. So I don't know how to get this into full screen. Is it okay?
So in the bottom right, if you see that standee, yeah, to the right of that, to the right, to the right, to the right. Yeah, that one.
Okay, there we go. So very happy to be here today and very happy to talk about one of the things that has occupied my mind for the last 20 years. Now, what we're going to do today is a kind of precursor, a prelude to the course I'll be teaching. The course is called Women in Hinduism, and I'll tell you a little bit about the course towards the end of this presentation. But what I'm going to do here today in this web.
Did we just lose her? Yes, she just disconnected. She'll join us. If you haven't put in the chat where you are zooming in from, please drop it in the chat. We've crossed 70 people, but our panelist has dropped off. She'll join us right back, hopefully. I'll double check on that. We do have transcripts if you want to see the transcript. I'm not exactly sure how you turn that on. It's one of the functions at the bottom. Savita Ji from San Jose, thank you for joining us. Sri Ramakumar Ji from Phoenix, Rajiv Ji from Seattle, Anitya Ji from India, Shashank Ji from Canada, Aparna Ji, an HUA student from Maryland. Great. Nish Ji from Toronto. Just give me a second while I make sure that we can. Yeshpal, of course. Great. Glad to have you on. Let me see what's going on with our panelist. Copying the invite. Get her back on. Maybe she's having some technical difficulties. And so Hindu University of America, we're transitioning our continuing education program into a community education program. Just a little shift in the name, but it's talking about important issues that are important to the community, like Hinduism and feminism. And we have our guest back. So I'll hand it back to her. Oh, more people in the chat. China Ji from Maryland, great to have you on. Ranjit Ji from United Kingdom. Yes, sorry for the technical difficulty, but we are ready to keep it going.
Okay. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. My computer is just shut down.
And yes, we will send a recording of the webinar afterwards. Renu Ji, don't worry about that. But please enjoy this presentation today. Save your questions. You can put them in the Q&A box later.
Ankur Ji, I need your help for 1 minute.
Yes.
How do I share my screen again?
That green box at the bottom, it says share screen.
Box. I'm not seeing it. Just give me 1 second, okay?
Yeah.
Share screen.
Closing other browsers would help.
Just share this. Sorry.
No problem, no problem. And if you are aware with Hindu University, we have recently gotten into the accreditation process. So we are a university on the rise and important to address issues like Hinduism and feminism. So we're glad to be hosting this webinar today. All right, there we go.
Are you seeing my screen now, Ankur Ji?
I want to go back to that full screen, that bottom right button, and
Okay.
we'll get started. Mapping the state of the field. Yes.
Yeah, sorry about all the technical stuff. So what we're going to do today is we're going to map the state of the field, and we're going to summarize quickly what the research trends so far have been like and why we have a problem with that and why we think at HUA that something needs to be done about this, and how to change the way the feminist discourse has been perceived, and how to improve it for the better. So as I see, there are many stakeholders in the discourse or in the problematic relationship that Hinduism and feminism has. We have the disciplines of feminism and Hinduism itself. As you very well know, Hinduism is not a formal discipline yet. It's not mainstream in India. So Hindu studies that takes place in the US, in other universities in the West, this is a major stakeholder. And then there is feminism itself, which you will find again in universities in India and elsewhere. You can divide the way feminism does its work in two ways, as Indian feminism and as Western feminism. And then there are Hindus themselves who have specific ideas about feminism. We'll come to that in just a second. And we would ideally like to move towards a Hindu feminism, something that addresses the questions that youngsters today are raising, and work towards equality, of course, because, why not? What's unfortunate is that the dialogue partners here are all unequal. So there is a sense, and this is what Indian feminists are saying, not me, that there is more intellectual labor put in by Western feminism, and Indian feminism tends to be more activist. And then that Hindus reject feminism too quickly. They have no understanding of it, and they think that it's a Western construct, therefore we must quickly reject it. And then Hindu studies, as it is done in the West, mostly looks up to feminism and is not always critical of feminism. So there is an imbalance in the way that work gets done. And then Indian feminism is mostly defining itself as secular, and it perceives Hinduism as irrelevant or as an obstacle to progress and equality. It just rejects Hinduism. And then but Hinduism itself, I believe, and these are the arguments that I'm going to be making in the course with evidence, embodies notions of parity and equality, but they are not immediately apparent because we are mostly using Western categories of thought. So between Hinduism and feminism, there are prejudices, stereotypes, lots of ignorance, and because lots of Hindus somehow, because an earlier generation didn't get educated in feminism, they somehow think that feminism is about women dominating men, when in reality that's not the case. That's not what feminists want to do. And they peg it at definitional issues, but actually that's not true. That's not where we should be pegging it at. Feminism can be made our own. And there is no one feminism. There are different kinds of feminisms. So without getting worried about definitional issues, we should, I think, work towards a Hindu feminism that will help us address the questions that our youngsters are raising today and the questions that we ourselves have towards practices, texts, traditions, and so on. So Hindus definitely think that feminism is Western and therefore reject it. So the other thing to do here is to think of feminism as a field of study and, not a field of inquiry and not ideology. And when we think about feminism in that way, we realize that it's just a mode of inquiry, a discipline of study. And, in that way, we can understand how useful it can be to our purposes. So we, as Hindus, we can say that we have problems with specific kinds of feminism, but not with feminism per se. And this is where we need to go, but this is not where we are right now. But things are changing, and younger Hindus are asking for equality in Hindu marriages. There are several misconceptions, and women are thought to be subservient in a marriage, and that's actually not coming from the authorities that they claim to be coming from. So these are problems we need to address. And then, so there is a disintegration of marriage and families today in India, as I'm seeing it, because women are refusing to marry partners who don't believe in an equal relationship. And there is continued ignorance about feminism. There is a preference for humanism over feminism. But, again, that there's no real opposition between the two. So that's a misconception. And then there's a lot of questioning about Hindu practices which appear discriminatory. There's an over-familiarity with these practices, and hence people think that they know what they're saying, but actually they don't, because these are matters that one has to look into very carefully. That's what we are also going to be doing in the course. And then there is an increased pursuit of inquiry, and that's where a university like HUA steps in. And there's an enormous curiosity in people. They want to understand what's going on. and they want to understand their heritage, the past, as well as the present. They want to fix the present. They want to see why things appear so lopsided and so on. And they're quickly embracing the rights discourse. And then there is the very problematic relationship between Indian feminism and Hinduism. So this work, which I have researched extensively, appears to be more about solidarity and positioning than substantive work. In fact, there is a disinclination to look at pre-modern Hinduism on its own terms because of the belief that there has been a significant break with the past through modern institutions such as the nation state. So they think that, that pre-modern pasts are just irrelevant. We don't have to engage with them. And there is just the Constitution of India. There is no culture mediating the two. But this is, just not true. As we all know, law does not function in a vacuum. So then researchers guided by leftist ideology and political positioning and excessive criticism of the Hindu right, when in reality, the Hindu right is just now emerging in India. There are very few intellectuals and very little research work that has been done. And, I think it's still emerging. So, and post-colonial feminism is not doing what it should be doing. Its logical conclusions are not yet, being expressed because there is fear that, the leftist ideologies will get dismantled. So true decolonization in this sense hasn't happened. And there are cultural differences that are not being addressed. So for instance, there is the difference of how nature and culture or mind body is viewed in the West and how it's viewed very differently in India. But I don't see many feminists. I don't see any, but I don't see many, and they are not mainstreamized. I don't see many feminist works that address these problems and then tell us exactly what we thought about when we thought about ourselves, our bodily self, our spiritual self. There is no emerging discourse, unfortunately, on these differences. And then there is such a big way in which India practices filial piety, and how does this actually interact with the rights discourse? I see a huge vacuum in research, and I'm hoping that the students who will come attend the courses will actually join us in creating the archive that we need to produce now. And there is a fundamental difference in selfhood, subjectivity, which goes unacknowledged. And the whole of Hinduism is not studied. So when Indian feminists look to solving modern problems, they look to the past in a piecemeal way, in a very utilitarian kind of way, very superficial, and therefore, end up with very wrong readings of Hinduism and misrepresent it in numerous ways. So again, the subaltern studies frameworks have led to inconsistent readings. The same actions are read as agentic or oppressed, and reading against the grain has not really worked because these readings don't hold up. They don't account for all the facts at hand, and in some, feminist discourse erases or distorts the experience we have. And it doesn't organize experience, and it overlooks experience in favor of ideologies. So it's trying to change us. It's not even trying to account for the experiences as we have right now. So its understanding of social transformation is just about, getting rid of a whole lot of culture, practices, tradition, and to transform the way we experience ourselves, which is kind of scary when you think about it. Because we don't know where we are headed, right? So when you ask deep questions, feminism just throws up its hands and it says, we don't know. We are just going to question the gender binaries, and then what happens as a result, we won't take responsibility for that. This is kind of, I'm not vilifying feminists here, but I'm saying that there's a research gap that we might need to fill. And then feminism suffers from Orientalism, which is a standard problem across disciplines today. There is an overemphasis on effects, and this is a general trend in feminism, Indian or not. And that has led to a lot of distorted readings, because the question of the origin of patriarchy has been largely abandoned. But some scholars keep it alive and in the West, and that's interesting. For instance, you have John Scott's work, and then you have 2 volumes, breaking out volumes that are very interesting. They try to address this question. Now, similar work has not happened in the Indian front, and that's kind of the lacunae that I'm talking about. And then there is mainstream Western feminism and Hinduism, which uses the rights discourse, the category of gender. It's interested in the balance of power, and it emphasizes upon choice, upon presence, visibility, and it works under the assumption that all religions are patriarchal, and that's kind of problematic. But 2 things I find very interesting in Western feminism is sexual difference feminism, and I want to just one more thing. I'll come to that. I have a slide here to show that. But Western feminism is not a monolith, and I'm not claiming that all of it is problematic. Just the same is true of Indian feminism as well. I do love the work of some scholars, and we will meet with so many such scholars in the course itself. Now, the 2 things that I like in Western feminism is increasing acceptance of femininity and sexual difference feminism, which acknowledges that men and women are different, and that women embracing femininity should not be a problem for feminism. So slowly we are expanding. Western feminism is expanding to accommodate what we need to understand other cultures, the concepts we need. And mainstream Hindu studies in the US is less ideological, more neutral when compared to Indian feminism. But there is an excessive reliance on textual study and history. And this becomes a problem, because lived experience is what we need to also access. India is a lived culture. Hinduism is mostly lived. Its practices are where it is. And so there are, like Ankurji mentioned, there are surges of goddess studies and so on, but these studies are often they are often conducted to fill a lacunae in the Western world. So for instance, there is no goddess culture that is prevailing today. It's largely dead in Western religions. And so that is the question that a number of researchers are bringing to Hinduism when they study Hinduism. So often there is an enormous excitement that here's a culture that has preserved its goddesses. But at the same time, that enthusiasm and excitement might, lead to, in the beginning, there's a lot of excitement, and then there's a lull, because they then begin to study it more deeply, and they begin to realize that it's not all as equal as we thought it was. And so what I'm saying is that Hinduism doesn't lend itself to Western categories in the way we want it to. We need to come up with categories of our own in order to do that. So when the initial excitement wanes, there is disappointment. So it seems that the initial 19th century encounter between India and the West that gave rise to 2 different opinions, Orientalism and Anglicism, where Orientalism thought that India was the birthplace of all culture, and then Anglicism thought that it was totally worthless. So these are the 2 extremes that seem to be still playing out even to this day. And then there are other feminists who see an ambivalence. Now, that's not very useful to Hindus and to the kind of work that we want to do here. So we need to make use of the work that Western feminists have done, but also see where we want to take it. So this is how I see the Western Hindu studies working on Hinduism. Either they say that Hinduism is amazing, or they say it mistreats women, or they say, I'm not sure if this is positive or negative. So then a very popular trope here is to track the life cycle of a woman, and to say that only in widowhood Hindu women attain power, only with the birth of a male child Hindu women attain power, and from experience, we know that this is not true, that what is there in the text is not what is lived culture, even if some texts are lauding women who are widows. That's because they're almost like renunciants, they're like sannyasis. So there is a certain reverence, and the perceived ill treatment is actually just actually what a sannyasi is supposed to look like. And because most feminist analysis just look for how much power women wield, and they can't understand that someone might want to give away power and relinquish power. So because of these problems and categories, widowhood is seen as very problematic. And generally there is an understanding that women's status in Hinduism is degraded. But in reality, Hinduism thinks that women can contribute to society, and that they have to perform their duties in order to pay off the 5 kinds of debts or runas that everybody has to pay up as well. So basically, what is a concern for moksha is often distorted in these feminist analyses, and they seem to assume a certain humanity even as we start with, but that's not the view that Hinduism holds. Hinduism thinks that we become more human, more humane as we go through life and undertake the samskaras, the duties, undergo some samskaras and undertake the duties that we are supposed to do. So in this way, all the comments it has to make about a daughter, a wife, a daughter-in-law, a mother, a widow, a mother-in-law, all of them turn out to be powerless, socially powerless. So key texts are misunderstood. The Manusmriti definitely has been misunderstood, when in reality Manusmriti actually classifies women into 2 kinds, as women who are exposed to the world and women who are not. And we'll talk about this in great detail. I will present you evidence, and you don't have to believe me without looking at the evidence. And so similarly in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, when Gargi, when Yajnavalkya tells Gargi not to ask deep questions about Brahman that have no articulation, they're ineffable, because Brahman is ineffable, feminists read it as Gargi being silenced by Yajnavalkya, and that's the kind of problem that we're dealing with. Similarly, when it comes to the status of a dasi, which Chakravarti problematizes, there is a problem, because in every text in the Mahabharata and almost every text, dasis are spoken of as bejeweled in gold ornaments, and no less. And then the Arthashastra has rules about how they must be treated. And we will, when we see the rules, they're as fair as they can be. So the whole idea that there is a gross mistreatment of people in the Hindu world is seriously problematic. And then there is the other end, where Bhakti and Tantra are glorified. But what is not understood is that the aim here is not social equality, even in Bhakti and Tantra. The aim is still moksha. So if there is social equality, it's just a byproduct of the path that was charted to moksha, which is, and that path is very inclusive, and that's the reason why we tend to perceive it as socially equal. But in reality, it is still associating itself with a renunciatory tradition, which relinquishes power, and and that has been grossly misread in feminist analysis. Okay, so another question to pose to ourselves is, are all these only methodological issues? And I have a feeling that yes, they are a problem, but they are not the only problem. They are not the whole problem. It's also about how we apply categories. So for instance, I have no problem with the category of gender. It's how you apply it that matters. And I have no problem with using the question of power, balance of power. I want to take it to every Hindu text ever. And I think I will still be able to show, and this is a challenge I've accepted, still be able to show that that power rested, social power rested with women. I'll be able to demonstrate this. So the problem is not merely with categories, Western categories alone. It's about how we read the text, how we apply them. So again, a rights framework is not a problem for me. I'm willing to take the rights framework to see how much rights women have. And I have several examples like Draupadi in the Mahabharata and so on, and across texts, across time, to show that there was actually parity and not patriarchy. And this is very clearly visible in the ritual give and take, where a giving and a taking must happen at all times. And more about this in the course. So basically, these are roughly the concepts that feminist analysis employ, and I have no problem with it. I'm going to accept most of these categories, but the assumption that all religions are patriarchal, that would be a problem. I have no problem in accepting choices and freedom as a category of thought, human rights, balance of power, presence and visibility, yes. But I'm not interested in merely studying effects. I want to also ask the question of origin, intention, and so on, so that we have a more balanced understanding of Hinduism. So Hinduism offers a deep insight that gender only matters in the social world, not in the real world. And I don't know if there are other religions that do this as well, but I have a feeling that this is unique, that the Atman is genderless. This claim is amazingly unique to Hinduism. And then there are many texts that will demonstrate to us that conduct matters and not gender, not caste, not gender. And then in Hinduism, there is another idea of complementarity between the two sexes in forms of Purusha and Prakriti. And then there are varieties of womanhood that we have not really fully explored. And we quickly develop negative stereotypes when it comes to a pativrata or sati savitri, and these are all quickly meme material and jokes, right? So we don't look at how there are categories of rishika, pandita, sadhvi. There is also devadasi, and there is patni, who is the ritual partner, and putrika, who actually takes over the father's properties and businesses and handles it herself. So we don't pay attention to these. And there is brahmavadini, sadhyovadu, and punyastri, and pativrata. The vrata there we don't focus enough on, because there was the understanding that if women worship deities directly, they will develop renunciation, and therefore women were asked to engage in social relationships, think of a husband as your god, and so on. But there was a reason for that, and it was not taken literally in lived practice, if you ask me, because this is made clear in the textual evidence we have, which says that it's not about your husband's gunas, it's not about whether he is worthy of your worship or not. Which goes to say that it's just motivating women to perform a number of duties in the household, and nothing else. And it's not that women were restricted to the household either, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So the way in which Hinduism envisages femininity, masculinity, and the relationship between the sexes is very different, and it's under-theorized and not theorized properly, if you ask me. And some evidence for this is there in the British perception of all Indians, Indian men as well, as effeminate. So I have a feeling that the way masculinity was perceived was different. In castes, the Kshatriyas were supposed to be masculine, the Brahmins, no, not at all. So you'll find them effeminate. And so there is no one notion of masculinity or femininity. If in fact there is one such in India today or amongst Hindus, that's what modernity has done. That's Victorian morality playing up. So we need to scrutinize modern developments as well as find out what tradition actually has to say. So the Hindu world throws up these categories. I've just spoken about it now, so I'm going to skip that. And in the Hindu world, like I said, the Atman is genderless. There is the Purusha Prakriti. There is Shakti, who is it's the independent goddess. She's not the spouse of any male god. She's not Lakshmi, Parvati, and Saraswati. She's independent, an entire cult of her own. And then there are notions of Stri Dharma. And there is a dynamic between Grihastha and Sannyasa. So whatever is normal in Grihastha is not so in Sannyasa. So there is a tension between these two realms, and they are kept separate so that one can transcend these realms properly when they have to. So then I have a whole session in the course on Stri Dharma, but basically Stri Dharma is how women achieved moksha. And like I was telling you earlier, women were not homebound. They were also women warriors, merchants, and scholars. But even in medieval times, we see women scholars, but not as many, and there's a reason for that. The Parashara Smriti imposes greater restrictions on women in Kali Yuga, and this is something we must understand. And this is not to do with Hinduism alone. This is as a response to what is going on, mainly the invasions, foreign invasions, and so on. This is the understanding that is there in Parashara Smriti, that these times have deteriorated, therefore women must be protected more. And hence more restrictions are placed. So we need to understand the context of the texts that we're dealing with. And when we do, we realize that if we feel safe enough in the context that we are in, we can do exactly what we want. We can be women scholars. If we are not under threat, then that's fine. So we need to contextualize in a deep way. So here are examples of women who represent the many colors of Hindu womanhood. You have Sulabha, Ubhay Bharati, Gargi, Shandili, and there are several yoginis in the Tantra tradition. There is Shandili's story in Mahabharata is just the most amazing story ever. And there is Maitreyi, of course, Yajnavalkya's wife, who joins him in the forest. And there is Savitri, who fights with Yama and brings back her husband. There is Shachi, Indra's wife, who tells us, who shows how to be loyal to someone. And there is the whole Devi conception, numerous Devis in the Vedas, Vak, Aditi, and just numerous. I haven't listed them all here. And then there is a whole other Dashamahavidya tradition. There is a Durga Lakshmi Saraswati tradition, which is allied to the male deities, but then there is also female deities are also independent. So then we have Madhavi, who represents Putrika, and she helps her father like no son might have helped him. And then there is Draupadi, Damayanti, and Shakuntala, all showing how strong women can function and teach their husbands a lesson or two. And then there is Meera, Andal, Avayar in the Bhakti tradition, who are equal to the male bhaktas. There is really no difference. So we have so again, like I made this point before, the gender fluidity that is there in Bhakti and Tantra, we tend to misread it as an attempt to reform Hindu society, when in reality it is not so. It is still concerned with moksha. So some of these distorted readings we need to respond to. So the final aim in the course, and what I think we should do, is to craft a Hindu feminism. And how do we do it? We do it by correcting the mistakes, of course. So it's a corrective. We read the whole of Hinduism, and we move away from neo-Hinduism and invented traditions of the colonial era. We commit ourselves to intertextual readings and greater contextualization. And we compare texts and practices, gather ethnographic data, create an archive, basically redo the research that has been, misrepresenting Hindus and Hinduism for a long time. And then we focus both on origins and effects, not merely one of the two. And we stop saying that that Hinduism is different, the vocabulary is different, and so on. We wrestle with it so that we can speak about it sensibly in the modern time as well. So we develop modern idioms, modern language, modern vocabulary with which to teach the next generation. And we also steer clear of Orientalism and anachronisms. We offer correctives, and we demonstrate parity based on evidence, and not just on nostalgia, not just on being defensive, right? No denial, no embarrassment, being fearless, and respond to modern discourses such as feminism. And I think that a Hindu feminism is a need of the hour, and it will curb the excesses of men's rights discourses and leftist feminism, both of which are gaining popularity in India today, and for all the wrong reasons. So a little bit now about the course. I just want to touch upon that. So what the course is going to do is it's going to study women's position in Hinduism. We have a focus on primary sources. We do engage the secondary sources. So don't think that this course is only about what Hinduism is saying. No, we're also inviting others to dialogue with us. So all the stakeholders that I charted out earlier, we're going to respond to and speak with. And then we're going to make evidence-based claims. And we are going to speak about topics from antiquity in contemporary idiom. And I've always said this, and I'll say this again, there are two protagonists in this course, Hinduism and feminism, and we're going to give equal credence to both. So if you're a feminist, please, you're welcome to this course. Come in, and we're going to have the best conversations. And it's a safe space. We're going to be empathetic to experiences, like many women's studies departments tend to be. And we're firmly located within the academic disciplines. So you will learn a thing or two about how to do research as well. So like I said, no nostalgia, critical approach to both the Hindu texts and to feminism. And we're going to be building bridges between all the stakeholders. There are a lot of opportunities for research. And two of the highlights of this course to me, which I'm very excited about, one is the Manusmriti, which I'm going to deconstruct. And the other is menstruation, which has come under so much debate in recent times. So our approach is going to be textual study and interpretation to some extent. But like I said, we are also going to engage with ethnographic work in the form of secondary sources. And our approach is mainly chronological. So we are going to touch the Vedas, the Dharma texts, the epics, Puranas, Bhakti. So you're going to get an understanding of all the texts that we have, all the genres, and a good sense of what Hinduism is saying about women, and how we must respond to it. Okay, so I'll take questions now. Ankurji?
Yes, great. What a interesting and detailed presentation, right? The scope, the range of texts. Maybe we'll stop sharing screen. And there are a few questions. There's only two in the Q&A box. I know people were chatting in the chat. I see some hands raised as well. If you want to voice your question, we can do that. We still have enough time to get through. So let's start. Anonymous question, but kind of interesting. Humanism and feminism, right? Maybe there's a dialectic there, a comparison, some thoughts on that.
Yeah, so when you ask a lot of Indians, Hindu Indians or Hindus, they will tell you, if you ask them if they're feminists, they will immediately tell you, we're not feminists, we're humanists, as if humanism is something opposed to feminism. In reality, that's not the case. The two are actually compatriots, if you like, and there is no discord. You can be a humanist and be a feminist. Feminism, like I said, it's not asking for women to dominate men. That's not the idea at all. Feminism is actually saying that we can be equal, right? And that's what humanism is also saying, that we are all equal, that we're humans first, and therefore, we need to be equal. So somehow in the Hindu psyche, humanism is more important than feminism, and that's kind of distorted. So we need to change that by looking at both carefully. And Hinduism has its own understanding of of humanism. So, and I was pointing out to that earlier, we are not fully human when we are born. This is the understanding. So as we go through life, we perform our duties and socialize more and undergo samskaras. That's when we become truly human. So we need to track these different notions of humanism as well. Yeah.
Great. Thank you for that. Prabhuji has kind of a, caste is always an important and unfortunately pervasive, but, we have varnas, right? And the separation and the distribution of different status or roles, right, performed in society that are necessary for it to run smoothly. So instead of division, and address the disparity by attaching equal importance to all roles to run a society. So just your thoughts on that, and if there's a relationship, and if you're going to get into that conversation.
On Varna?
Yeah, Varna, or the division of roles in society, and how, women in certain roles, men in other roles. You talked about gender fluidity and how sometimes there is no separation, but obviously there are genetic and biological differences.
Yeah, there are separations in roles, in the sense that because the ultimate goal was moksha, you had the 4 ashramas, and women associated themselves with these ashramas, and they had their own duties to perform, and whatever duties they performed, they achieved their moksha through that. And so if you're a Brahmin woman, then you were your ritual partner, you were the ritual partner of your husband, and whatever punya he earned through his ritual performances, you had an equal share to that. So there was equality there. And then if you're a Kshatriya, you had your own set of duties. If times were hard, you could even go out and fight on the battlefield, and women have done this. We have evidence for this. And similarly, with Vaishya women, you could be merchants as well, not merely homebound. So in this sense, so similarly with Shudra women have worked inside as well. So yeah, there were these roles, and I cannot say that there was no flexibility in the sense that you couldn't move to one or another role. I couldn't say that, because in the textual evidence that I see, women first define themselves. For instance, Draupadi introduces herself as a pativrata first. So you could be a pativrata, you choose to be that, or you could also choose to be a ganika. You could also be a devadasi, and so on. So there was some amount of choice. There was this act of defining oneself, and there were different kinds of womanhood that were available, I think. And whether they were birth-based or not is another kind of question. And I have a whole other take about caste itself. And we won't go into that for now, unless someone has another question.
There's quite a few on marriage, right? Obviously, that's an important institution. There's aspects of it, right? All the way from problematic nature of child marriage to widows, right? How they're treated, how that developed. And then Ketan Ji is saying there's Kanyadan, right? Many women rebel on this idea of dan. So on all of that, just your thoughts on marriage, the whole range, if you can, because there's kind of those 3 questions I saw: child marriage, widows, dan, rebelling against the institution itself.
Yeah. With child marriage, the marriage would never be consummated until the wife, the woman in question, was physically ready. So, and there was often a huge gap between the men and the women. And this is ancient times and medieval times if you're talking about. This is no longer true, as you know. the reason for the subservience, if you like, to the husband and to his family is because there was a huge age gap. Women would be married off at age 8 and so on, if we are to believe the Manusmriti. And so you would be taken into the husband's household as an apprentice who would learn a whole lot of things. That was your education, so to speak. But this was not true of all times. That's what we need to remember. Because like I said, there is the notion of Brahmavadini at one point of time. And but you see that in medieval times as well, in the form of Ubhaya Bharati. And our historical, we don't have the best history. So we can't say for sure that women were always married off at age 8 and so on, and could never have been scholars and so on. We cannot say that. So this was one, the child marriage issue. And if you have to think about Kanyadan, the idea there was that not that women were objects that could be given away, but that women could not be sold. So the idea there was that you will not sell, you will not make a transaction out of your children in any way. And this was true in many ways. For instance, if you see Nachiketa's story, there too the emphasis is that you don't make a transaction out of the danas that you give. So similarly, women could not be made objects, daughters could not be made objects of transaction. That is the emphasis there that we find in the texts. Not that one can give away women, but the giving away was something that is there. It's there in all cultures, the giving away, if you like. But yeah, the concern was that it should not be made into a transaction, and especially a transaction that's somehow beneficial to the parents, but that it's only beneficial to the daughter. That was the sense. So you would adorn her with jewels, and then give her away. So yeah, what was the third thing?
Widows.
Widows, right? So widows are really more like ascetics. So it was a relinquishing of worldly desires, but since there are no categories in modern studies to understand what that looks like, or why that should be the case, right? So widows end up, in our modern discourses as ill-treated, as mistreated, when in reality the idea is that they are. See, the idea of marriage is that you're sharing karma for as long as you're alive. So whatever the widow did, the karmas of those still go to the husband, no matter where he is, and so on. And karmas of the husband are still with the wife. So the idea was that that women live austere lives, so that that bond is not broken. This was the understanding. So like I said, the relinquishing of power, behaving like a sannyasi, that's something that modern discourse have a very hard time to understand. They want to overlook it. They want to say that this was religion's hold on us. But in truth, there is a lot of joy in relinquishing power, in relinquishing choice, because it's a joy of a different kind, and it's not impossible to understand, but you just need some help, I think. So yeah, that's where the course is headed.
Great. We have quite a few questions. A lot of people added almost 16 and some hands up. So let me allow Radhaji, if you're ready to unmute, you can ask your question, and Dhavalbhai, you can go next, and then we'll get back to the typed out questions. Yeah, Radhaji.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you so much. This is my first time. I'm enjoying your talk. Dr. I just want to say your name properly, Sushumna Ji. Yeah, thank you so much. I love this university. I think I'm gonna do your Sanskrit course on womanhood and feminism. I feel you I just want to compliment first and put the foundation for you as a support for you. I think you are talking about consciousness, that the level of consciousness, when that is raised, then people can see what Dharma stands for and how people can implement this in their life, because all the scripture kind of balance each other and they touch each other in a way, because when people know the self, then that expand to the direction of Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. And that's what you beautifully showed in your one of the file of the faces of Dharma, and called this womanhood of Sita, Mata Radha, all those beautiful faces of Dharma. So just not to talk too long, it was so beautiful, so many questions, but my support. Thank you so much. It was wonderful. So it's not about feminism, it's about women is Prakriti. I think that's what I got from your talk, that they seated in the heart of Purushottam. And without that heart, we are nothing, because women are the nourishing and nurturer of the entire society. This is why that foundation you're bringing through your talk and through your university. So this is wonderful and beautiful. I applaud that. Thank you.
Thank you, but it's also about feminism. It's also about understanding feminism correctly and owning it and making it your own. So yeah.
Okay, we can debate that, but I'm gonna stop here. Thank you.
Yeah, Dhavalbhai. All right.
Yeah, hi. Thank you. Thank you for this wonderful talk. And Sushumna is such a nice name. Reminds of the Kundalini Sushumna Nadi. So the questions I had was, one is this concept of humanism versus feminism. So why even humanism alone is enough to do the right thing, apparently, right? Because human is a male or a female, right? So why even need the term feminism? That's just a fundamental question I had for your perspective. And secondly, on one hand, its equality is there, and that's a good thing, and it's apple and orange sometimes, because roles and stuff, because of the different constitution. On the other hand, also I've seen, like, sometimes women want the male to open the door and do stuff like that. So if it's equal, then why that woman's lib type of concept, right? Because if it's equal, it should be equal both ways, right? Type of thing. So just want your thoughts on that. Just interesting thoughts.
Yeah. It hasn't been always equal anywhere in the world, for sure. And that's why we have laws in place today that want to ensure equality for women, and that looks lopsided. But the reason for that is that it has not always been equal, and we need to have those conversations. And humanism alone is not enough to have those conversations. We need to make sure at all times that women have equality. In the Hindu world, women had equality in a different sense. But when modern discourses come to bear on it, it doesn't look equal at all. And that's the conversation we need to have. And feminism is simply the discipline we use, the academic discipline we use, in order to have those conversations where we inquire in detail what the relationship between men and women looks like. Is there equality here? Or what kind of equality is Hinduism talking about? So we still need to have these conversations. And for that, feminism is a very useful platform. Sorry about that. Did I answer all these questions?
Yeah, actually, thank you for that. The second part of the question was, equality is a good thing. And on the other hand, many times women also expect men to do certain things, like open the door, that aspect, right? So then, and on the other hand, they ask for women's lib, like, which is equality and stuff. So then, isn't that a contradiction?
Yeah, it's a contradiction because women have, because there are specific notions of masculinity and femininity in place, and these are mostly Western, Victorian. That's what I was trying to say in the talk as well. But the Indian notions of femininity and masculinity are much different. They vary across the Varnas as well. And what these are is something that we still need to understand properly. We haven't. So the whole chivalry kind of narrative comes in because women were perceived as delicate, as weak, and so on. And this kind of narrative is problematic. But when you think about how vulnerable women are when they are young mothers, and so on, that's when you need to actually help them. So there is no one way that we can prescribe for all times, and this context sensitivity is something that you find Hinduism lending itself to a lot. So there are specific times when you have to help women for specific reasons, and at other times they might be fighting on the battlefield. So
Right, exactly. Yeah. So great, thank you. Got the perspective. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that, Double Boy. We've got quite a few questions still. We're at the top of the hour. Let me launch a quick poll. Just let us know if you're interested in enrolling in the course Women in Hinduism. Yes, definitely. If you have questions, maybe in the future. I think this is the first course Dr. Kanan is teaching at HUA. So we'll see how this development of a Hindu feminism, and maybe there's a different term. Somebody had a question. Is that the right term? Should there be a different term? And please do fill out that poll. Thank you for answering. Almost half of the folks so far have already filled it out, out of the 70 people with us still. Thank you for sticking around. We'll get into a few more questions. The interfaith aspect, right? Yashpal, interesting question. Ike Oza, right? Is if you can see Dr. Kanan in the Q&A box. And then we got Fal Pandya Ji saying they're gonna be hosting an interfaith kind of discussion where they present a comparison with other communities, right? Other faith communities. So just the interfaith aspect of it, you know, we hear terms, and I don't even want to get into it too much, but it is pervasive. It comes out, you know, there's love jihad, there's, you know, maleism, there's no maleism, is there feminism, you know, there's different ways and different aspects that it is really different people will put their spin on it and their take and apply it in ways that just kind of those couple fronts, if you want to take a minute or two to discuss your thoughts.
Yeah, I did mention the men's rights discourses that are emerging in India, and these have been a recent development, and mostly in response to the kind of feminism that we've had in India, which is very leftist in nature. And leftist feminism, like I said, questions more than it provides answers, and it doesn't take responsibility to provide answers. And maybe it's fine to say that as intellectuals, because we can't have the whole answer all the time, or some perfect prescription to offer. But we need to raise questions. But if leftist feminists are raising questions, then as Hindus, we also need to ask some important questions, and we need to respond to what they're saying, because some of the things that they are saying are misrepresentations of Hinduism. And when we correct those misrepresentations, I think we arrive at a more wholesome understanding of selfhood that will give us answers, and these answers will of course come from Hinduism, which aimed to leave humans more wholesome than they were previously. So that's where we are headed, right, in this course. So the men's rights discourse is a response to a certain kind of feminism, and when we fix that feminism with with a deeper understanding of what the situation actually was in our heritage, in Hindu heritage, then I think our men's rights discourses will also be fixed in a certain way. They will be balanced in their approaches. They will recognize that women need to be equal and also protect their own rights. And in a similar way, in feminism will be the platform where we have these conversations. It's just a field of study. It's just a discipline, really. And just because it has female, don't think that it's something to do entirely with women. That's not what it is. It's an academic discipline to ask these questions and to seek to answer them.
Before we get to the interfaith kind of conversation and how Ms. Garcia is kind of talking about how Hindu-phobic speakers point out things like sati and karwa chauth, some females not being allowed to go to the mandirs when they're menstruating or pregnant. and taxes on women on different ways. So if you want to touch, because that kind of fits into how I think that's part of your answer or your discussion point.
Yeah, I have a whole session on menstruation, so I don't want to get into that. But if you're interested in that, please take this course because you're going to have so much fun debating it. And like I said, the idea is not to be defensive about Hinduism in this course. The idea is to actually work for both women and Hinduism, and for an equality of the sexes, so men are not left out. So yeah, I don't want to talk about menstruation. About love jihad, I don't know what to say. That's a product of Hindus being very liberal, isn't it? And so there are so many problems to do with the kind of liberalist discourse that we're encountering. And one of the problems is simply this for me. It's intellectual. It's research based. It's that they don't have an understanding of Hinduism. They don't have a good understanding of Hinduism. They don't want to get one. And when they do sit down to read it, they only read it the way they want it. And basically they're, misrepresenting the issues at hand. So yeah, that's pretty much what I'd say about love jihad. And menstruation. About Karwa Chauth, another friend of mine was recently asking me this. And that's a practice that emerged in a certain community, mostly the warrior community, where men tended to go to war and lose lives and so on. So there is a context to that. And when you understand the context, you don't perceive it anymore as a practice that was designed to control women. So what we need to do with Karwa Chauth today is a different question. And I think a lot of women will come up with answers of their own. Some will say, I'll follow it still, and some will reject it, and so on. And all that is okay, as long as we understand the context of that practice, right? So that's where I am at right now, to understand the context of how these practices came about. Did I miss anything? Sati, I have a whole second part to this course where we take up Sati in a very, very deep way. So I don't want to talk about it now. Yeah, let me skip that because that's a huge topic.
Yeah, it's a huge topic. We're already 10 minutes past the hour. We have quite a few more questions. Rajesh Ji, you typed out a pretty interesting point and your hand is up. Let me allow you to talk, and then maybe Shraddha Ji, two more kind of voice, and then we're going to be closing in on the end of the webinar.
Hello.
Yeah, Rajesh, go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you so much for taking up my question. I had a very interesting take on this, that almost like around 1,000-1,200-year-old temples that we can see, like Khajuraho and the other temples in Indonesia and everything, there we can see that the women are dressed such that they are very liberal and they are kind of very independent, and they can actually flaunt their bodies and whatever they are doing. So this type of attitude of women that we see nowadays is only of the stronger economies. The countries which actually provide them security, actually provide them rights, and actually give them that stability to stay in the society and flourish. So I want to highlight this fact that when these people of India were there that time, they had that kind of culture. But after like around 700 to 600 years ago, things started changing a bit. And when I think the invasion started, and there is some sort of insecurity which developed within the nation itself. And my question is that what do you think about this transition that happened, and where has this led India towards, like, and where we are heading now, right now? Yeah.
Yeah. So those transitional times were certainly times of trauma. That's what we see in the records that we have, that the shift in women's social power, or how public they were, it kept changing depending on who else was entering India. But if we are now in a place where we feel safe, then we should, not restrict women regarding anything. Why should we, right? So you're so right in what you said, that if you're well respected when you head out, because no matter what, then you can wear whatever you want. You wear fewer clothes in the summer or more in the winter. It shouldn't matter at all, right? If you're well respected when you step out, none of this should matter. And that was probably there in India, that level of dharma where you don't look upon another person, with malice, with disrespect. Was probably there. And today I might think that we are slowly heading back to a space where women want to be respected no matter what, and they're taking the discourse into their own hands, and they're telling us, and I'm one of those women, that please respect women no matter what. It shouldn't matter to you who we are, what we do. No, so none of this matters. So yeah, that's my take. Great comment.
Thank you, Rajesh. Shraddhaji, as you unmute, I think you are, let me just drop in the chat some of the details of the course. It's going to be on Tuesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern. It's going to start October 10th. You can click that link and see some more details. All right, go ahead, Shraddhaji.
I'm very happy that you're giving this course. All along, all that I have seen and I have read is only to suppress women. And it's not just in Hinduism. If you attend the Commission on Status of Women, the conferences given out by UN in the month of March, which have closer to 600 meetings, you will know that this way of treatment of women is global. It's not just Indians or Hindus. So whatever it is, and I think most of all these things in any religion come from the scriptures altered and the priests. So your presentation should be given out in the temples if they will permit you. I'm very happy that HUA gave a recent presentation in New York, Ganesha Temple, and that's the path HUA should take and also should come out, and people like you should join Women Graduates USA and American Association of University Women to spread more words about what we Hindus are, because people only know that minorities are being suppressed in India and only the Muslims. They know nothing about Hinduism. So you all should come out and speak more about Hinduism. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that comment.
Right. There's still quite a few. Professor Hiramath Goa, what is the way out and of the digression between Western and Oriental cultures? And I'm not sure what it means by digression, but right, Western and Oriental cultures, that bifurcation, that separation, is it a digression? Is that something that we can get away from?
We should preserve the cultural differences. There is no way to resolve it by simply accepting Western modernity and pretending it's our own. It's not. And unless it comes from within in a holistic manner, it'll never truly, feel right for Hindus. And that's the reason why in this course we're trying to, create dialogues between Western discourses and Hindu discourses, and we're trying to see how to build these bridges and how to build a Hindu feminism that is in modern idiom but retains the spirit of Hinduism. So it's not just about superficial things, but about how to retain the spirit of Hinduism in everything that we do today. Because cultures cannot be erased, and they should not be. If the Western world is standing up for diversity today in any way, then this is what this means, right? That cultures don't get erased and start to look like the West, but they work out their own understandings of how to be in this world today. So yeah.
Wow, we have quite a few, and including comments. Janki Vishwanathan, glad to have you on. Thank you for joining us. Aparna Dave is ancient texts are misunderstood by the current Hindu society. Is that the crux of the issue, and what's changed? The progressive thought to current orthodox view of women. What has changed? So.
Yeah, that we don't understand ancient texts properly, don't contextualize it. That is part of the problem, yes. And but there's also more, isn't it, in the sense that how do we relate to these texts today? Where do we draw the line, and so on? Because women today want to be free, they want to have more choices, and so on. So where do we draw lines, and how do we retain the spirit of Hinduism, you know, like I said, without pretending to be what we are not? You know, how do we negotiate the two? So
yeah. Professor Hirmit Go also had made a comment, right? Scriptures have two parts, some eternal truths and some are relevant to the time and space, kind of what you touched on right there. The presentation, Dr. Anita Prasad, the webinar recording will be available, but we generally don't share the PowerPoint presentation. Your other question, I don't know which paper you read that says gender parity takes 134 years to be fulfilled, but I think that matters on where you start, right? That's a big part of how do you, and what kind of gender parity is kind of what we're talking about. So thank you for joining us, Dr. Prasad. I think we're close to the end of our webinar. We didn't mention Sri Dharma kind of in the text. So maybe if you want to just talk about that, what's modern Sri Dharma?
yeah, so we'll have to think about it and arrive at an understanding. But what I can tell you this much is that the ancient understanding of it was one of parity. Sri Dharma was not subservience, but one of equality, because, like I mentioned, the wife had an equal share in the ritual performances of the husband. And whatever those karmas may have been. If you were a Brahmana, it would be ritual performances. If you were a Kshatriya, it would be, you know, how much courage you displayed and the punya that you derived from that. So the wife basically had an equal share in almost everything that the husband did. So the understanding of Sri Dharma that we have, if you want to look at it in a certain way, was to attend to her own important duties, right? By which and two of these duties are childbirth and child rearing, if that is what is part of one's life. So that, and then the rest of the duties are what all human beings are supposed to do. So we have 5 kinds of rinas or debts: Pitra Rina, Deva Runa, and so many. I won't go into that right now. 5 kinds mainly, which we were all, men and women, we were all supposed to pay off. And Sri Dharma is simply women's duties. So whatever you take up as your duty, and you could define yourself in a certain way. You could define yourself as a pativrata, and therefore, you know, be the manager of your household, and you know, carer for your family. But you didn't have to be that. You could define yourself differently as well. And we've seen Hindu women do that in history. So Sri Dharma is not negative as far as I can see it in the textual evidence that I see.
Great. I'm going to take, even though we took one question from Dr. Anita Prasad, I'm going to take another one, because she's asking, what can we do to reach more population of India inside and outside of India, make people educated? That's what we're doing at Hindu University of America, right? This is a platform so that we can have experts and leaders like Dr. Sushumna Ji have a course, have these webinars, educate people, give us the information, and then we can go out. We have blogs, we have videos, we're making presentations in mandirs. Thank you for that. And we're still at the start, right? We feel like this resurgence, this renaissance of Hinduism, whatever you want to call it, we're still kind of at the start of it. And Hindu University of America is just proud. I'm excited to be a part of it, to do our part, to share, to do these webinars, to teach the courses. If you want to invite us to a presentation at a mandir, please do. If you have any creative ideas on how we can continue to do this outreach, please feel free to email me. I dropped my email in the chat. And I hope you'll take this course or other courses at HUA. If you didn't fill out the poll, please do minimize, maximize. Maybe you can just let us know. It helps us. Rajesh Ji, I think we're closing in. We'll follow up. If you have a specific question that we can get back to later, we would like to. We'll probably do a second webinar, maybe with other, as we grow and follow up on this, as we discussed. There's so many layers and levels to this. There's whole courses on some of these topics, or class sessions that we'll be doing. So with that, let me give it to Dr. Kanan to give us some closing thoughts. And I just encourage you to take the course, enroll in something at HUA, participate in this important mission that we're on, maybe by taking this course. So with that, let me hand it to you to close us out for today.
Yeah, I'm seeing so many interesting questions, but I think we're out of time. I encourage everybody to take this course. It's going to be a fantastic journey together. And you will see only evidence-based claims. You will not see defensiveness. That's one thing I want to emphasize on. And then I want to say that this course is open to men, women, and people who define themselves as feminists, even if you're a leftist feminist, because we want to create a dialogue with you. We want to have that dialogue with you that we haven't had. So, I'm looking for a diverse kind of group when I'm teaching this course, and I'm very excited about it. So I think we're going to do fantastic things.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Dhanyawad. Namaste. See you in class or see you at the next webinar.
Yeah, see you.